Now, joining me now to break all this down and a whole lot more, Rudy Giuliani, personal attorney for President Trump. Rudy, thanks for spending some time with us tonight. If the left cannot agree now that investigating the origins of this probe that was so extensive, cost so much money, and occupied so much time and man hours over the last couple of years, then what's really the point anymore of arguing these points with them at all?
Well, I mean, I've actually come to that conclusion reluctantly, Laura. You know, I would say a little over a year ago when I got involved representing the president, I still had something left of the idea that when it really comes down to it, if it's really serious, even the left-wing press is going to take very serious allegations of crimes that could be very harmful to our country seriously. And now I'm convinced that they will not listen to allegations of crimes by Democrats. I mean, I guess we should have known that when we saw how they reacted to Hillary, you know, destroying the getting rid of 30,000 emails, destroying servers, destroying phones, and dealing with classified information in a cavalier, totally negligent, and I would say criminal manner. They just brushed that off as if it was nothing. And now they're doing the same thing with this. I mean, these are very, very serious crimes if they're true. If there is a falsified Pfizer affidavit, which now it's certain it was falsified. The question is, was it knowing or negligent? Almost like we got with Hillary, right? Knowing or negligent. Then we have serious consequences. If Comey was knowingly signing that verified affidavit, knowing that Steele was not reliable, knowing that there were things he could have verified that he didn't, then he's guilty of making a false statement under oath.
Well, yeah, Rudy, not to speak of knowing who paid for the dossier. Just the fact that the opposition candidate to the president paid for it at least calls, you know, the motivations into question, if not the credibility of the underlying salacious allegations. So the fact that that wasn't made clear in the FISA warrant when it would have taken one sentence to do, I think that speaks volumes of what was intended.
He has to have known that he put a corrupt agent in charge of that investigation. I mean, Peter Strzok demonstrated in his texts, and a bunch of them have been deleted, by the way, by Mueller. People forget that months and months of Strzok and Page texts were deleted and removed by the Mueller organization. Astounding, actually, right? And the press doesn't mention that either. But even with the ones that we have, it's quite clear that Peter Strzok had a plan to stop Donald Trump from being president and an insurance policy to remove him should he get elected. The plan was the whole Strzok dossier, the affidavit, the Pfizer, setting up Papadopoulos. I mean, that's pretty darn clear now. The question is, how much of that did Comey know?
Yeah.
And also, did Comey observe how irregular the investigation of Hillary was? Must have figured out, I mean, you know, Comey worked for me for 3 years. Now, he's either turned into an idiot or he knew what was going on. But if I had a guy that was conducting an investigation of a high-level subject like Hillary Clinton, and, hey, you know, they ended up doing a 302 rather than interviewing her under oath. They wrote the report 2 months before they concluded the investigation. The Justice Department told them how to conclude the investigation, and Comey did a performance that day that probably is the most disgraceful performance, at least publicly, by any FBI director.
I just rewatched it for a monologue I did. But Rudy, I gotta ask you, this is a perfect segue, because I want to get your thoughts on this part of Barr's interview as well. He was asked about the term treason that the president and others have used to describe some of the bad actors in the FBI. Let's watch.
The president has tweeted and said publicly that some of those in the upper echelon, Comey, McCabe, etc., committed treason.
Well, as a lawyer, I always interpret the word treason not colloquially but legally, and you know, the very specific criteria for treason. So I don't think it's actually implicated in the situation we have now.
So do you agree, or do you think treason does fit?
Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know about treason. What it is certainly as serious or more serious than what they were trying to pursue President Trump on, with absolutely no evidence except that little Papadopoulos statement, and we have plenty of evidence. Trying to remove a president of the United States on a false charge and then going through false affidavits, phony dossiers, setting up people. I don't know if it's treason, but it's sure an act against the United States. I mean, it's a conspiracy against the United States of America.
Yeah, well,
certainly a crime, and a very, very serious one for which people should go to jail for a very long period of time.
Rudy,
so nobody else does it.
Yeah, and all these people who have been jawboning for 2 years about, look, legitimate concerns that Russia, especially, but other countries as well, want to meddle in our elections. I think that's a fine and legitimate concern that everybody should be worried about. But with that concern, there also should be a concomitant concern that individuals in the United States were trying to affect. The duly elected president of the United States, removing him from office with this slow-rolling coup that was going on. So the same people who care about meddling when it's done by the Russians, why don't they care about meddling when it's done by the deep state?
Well, meddling by the Russians, or meddling by Ukraine, by the way, Laura, of which there is plenty of evidence, including a finding by a court in the Ukraine that a specific individual delivered dirt on the Trump campaign to a representative of the Democratic National Committee and a representative of the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's a finding of a court. There's been no finding in all these months of any kind of Russian anything with the Trump campaign. And it turns out to be disproven by 2 big, long investigations. We already have definitive proof that the Democrats, Hillary's people and the DNC, were using Ukrainian officials to dig up dirt on the Trump campaign, including the possibility that the dirt they dug up was knowingly falsified. And they want to avoid it. They want to avoid Joe Biden's son getting $1.5 billion from China.
Oh, that has to be.
And
that whole
getting $5 million from Ukraine. And Joe negotiating for our country. Joe caving into China when the kid gets a $1.5 billion deposit 8 days later in his useless private equity fund. A joke of a private equity fund. How about $5 million from Ukraine after he gets tossed out of the military for failing a cocaine test?
An astounding lack of curiosity.
From maybe one of the biggest crooks in the Ukraine, by the way.
And but then they called you off that, though. I mean, you were going to go over there and do some more investigation.
I didn't go over there because they have surrounded the present president of Ukraine with Soros people, Democrats, and people that were trying to set us up. I was going over there because I want to make sure that they investigate the Ukrainian collusion conspiracy with Hillary's people. I will go when I'm sure that they're not going to misstate why I'm going there. The Biden thing fell into my lap. I was not looking for it. In fact, I was a little annoyed by it.
We covered it like 2 months ago.
I know you covered it. You see it in the Washington Post, a little bit in the New York Times, but kind of sanitized. Yeah. CNN, you know, would go into conniptions if they had to cover that. I mean, I don't know what you have to do to get investigated if you're a Democrat.
But they're not. These aren't investigative reporters.
Maybe the kid's got to get $2 billion before you get investigated.
Yeah, but Rudy, I think, look, we don't have many investigative reporters left because they used to investigate all corruption. They were interested in getting to the bottom of all corruption. Now they're interested in getting Trump.
This is a great story. True or not true. If you prove it, it's a great story. If you disprove it, and I am willing, to presume them innocent, unlike what they did to my president.
Yeah,
I am willing to presume them innocent like they didn't do for my client. They're still not doing it.
Of course they did.
Since he has to prove his innocence. According to Mueller, he has to prove his innocence. Absurd.
Yeah, well, it's turning the legal standard on its head. I guess I have to go back to law school and learn the new way of proving your innocence in court. All right, Rudy, another interesting point from this Barr interview was Barr's status update. A lot of us have been wondering what's going on with the Inspector General's report, what's going on with the other investigation John Huber is doing out in Colorado. And we want to hear from him on what he said there. Let's watch.
Huber had originally been asked to take a look at the FISA applications and the electronic surveillance, but then he stood back and put that on hold while the Office of Inspector General was conducting its review. So he has not been active on this front in recent months, and so Durham is taking over that role. The other issues he's been working on relate to Hillary Clinton. Those are winding down, and hopefully we'll be in a position to bring those to fruition.
Wow.
I appreciate the honesty and also the delivery of the Attorney General, who I have enormous and increasing respect for. But I got to tell you, as a former U.S. Attorney and a former Associate Attorney General who ran the criminal side of the Justice Department, I would not stand down for an Inspector General's investigation over a criminal investigation in a million years. There's no way Huber should have gotten out of the way for the Inspector General. Sorry. Criminal investigation.
Why would they do that? That was done before Barr, though, right? Would that have been done before Barr?
Barr, I can't imagine. He's being very diplomatic.
Yeah.
I watched his face when he said that. And he's a professional. And he said that with a certain degree of sarcasm. I'm sure he won't admit it. He doesn't have to. No way should you stand down with a criminal investigation of the magnitude of what's involved in that.
Yeah.
Perjury to the FISA court on a national security court. I helped to establish the FISA court, by the way, with a friend of yours, Joe DeGenova.
Oh, yeah.
He was the first lawyer for the FISA court, and I helped to write it when I worked for President Ford and Attorney General Levy. And what they did to the FISA court, even negligence, is an outrage because it is such an intrusion into our privacy. It's like, you know, it's like doing an operation of our brain, the government doing an operation of our brain, and you better have damn good evidence of it. And they didn't have, as they say in New York, bupkis.
Rudy, thanks for joining us on a Friday night. We really appreciate it. You take care.